Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I just had no response prepared whatsoever. So, Tony, let's hear about you. How are you doing?
Tom, I don't care for the Uno reverse of the how are you doing? So please do not. I don't care for it. But since you asked, you know what? I'm doing well. I had some breakfast. We'll probably have some lunch later on, and perhaps maybe parlay all of that into dinner on this great Thursday. Is it a Thursday? Yes, it is a Thursday.
I did, as you were saying that, I did think back to, there is a podcast it's the athletics baseball podcast called The Wind Up. And they had two shows recently that made me think of you. One of them was about bold predictions and how bold predictions have replaced just regular predictions, and everyone makes bold predictions. And they were sort of like breaking down all the kinds of bold predictions. And I'm listening. I'm like, I feel seen here, like the overly specific bold predictions. I'm like, I'm really feeling seen and heard here. That was very powerful. And there was also a guy who was talking about the fact that, he's, they sort of set him up with like, hey, how are you doing? He's like, fine. And that was it. And he's like, well, I feel like if it's a very general, like sort of start to the show, you're not looking for much. So, if you ask me a very specific question, then I feel like I could go longer. So I'm like, hey, there's a guy who always asks me very general questions at the beginning of shows. And maybe I should just stop talking altogether and make him come up with more specific questions at the beginning of the show. So anyway, so those are the two times I thought about you the last week. And it was all during baseball podcasts.
Are you done? Are you finished? Can we move on?
Mostly. Tony, how are you? Sorry, did we get the answer on that? I feel like we didn't quite get an in-depth answer there.
No, I'm doing well. Ready to talk about some Ohio State football, if that's okay. And not talk about Ohio State basketball, if that's okay. And I think both of those things are okay. Tom, we've been through 2 Ohio State football practices in the spring, now 13 to go, but I wanted to discuss some of the things that we've seen from those first 2 days. And so what we're doing is discussing, Tom, some of my things that I like to discuss, which is my tweets. So I threw like 15, although Tom, I accidentally double numbered some. So there are, I think, 2 9s and 10s, which I'm glad that people weren't confused by that. But just some thoughts from first 2 days. And we thought we'd go ahead and discuss some of those and talk it out here. And the first one I have for you, Tom, is anytime that I'm always going to use an opportunity to talk about Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter. And so that's what I want to do here, because Mylan Graham, I think, is working into the number 4 receiver. He's going to be battling Bryson Rogers, I think, for that. And so basically, I know Mylan Graham is getting a bunch of buzz, which he should, but I don't know that enough people are talking about Quincy Porter yet. And the true freshman wide receiver out of New Jersey, who, Tom, when we first saw him wearing at number 11, like, the number really doesn't matter, but like, he looks like a college football big time receiver, and he looks all legit as 6'4". And even before he got here, like on signing day or whatever, when we're doing shows, and I'm jokingly saying like, well, he's somewhere between Marvin Harrison and Jeremiah Smith. But Tom, I think as a true freshman, he could be, because we're talking about Marvin Harrison, 11 catches, Jeremiah Smith, 74. So somewhere in there. And if you take away Marvin Harrison's Rose Bowl performance, which was like 5 catches, I think Quincy Porter can get into that 6 catch in the regular season range, and Jeremiah Smith, like 57-ish catches in the regular season. So when I say he's somewhere in between there, I think I'm right.
One of those things that is actually less stupid than it sounds, which is, I mean, that's as close to a compliment as I probably pay you in this show. So that's something. He feels like, I feel like everyone's brain has sort of been broken in terms of like, what is an exceptional freshman season for a wide receiver as a freshman? And, the Jeremiah Smith thing is so far beyond exceptional. Like, really, really good freshman seasons are Chris Olave, where he kind of comes on strong in November and has a couple touchdowns against Michigan and becomes a big part of the offense during that last month or month and a half of the season. Or Garrett Wilson, where he does a little bit early on in the kind of garbage time stuff, and then you sort of start to see him a little more later. Jackson Smith and Jigba, where it's just like you're taking on a little bit of a role late in the season. Like, that's a really good freshman season. And Marvin Harrison, as you said, 6 catches in the regular season. He had 3 touchdowns in the Rose Bowl. Those were his only 3 touchdowns of the year, and those were only because Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson weren't playing in the Rose Bowl. So that, I think, is kind of more of a realistic expectation for Quincy Porter. But from what we've seen so far, that's a realistic expectation for Quincy Porter, where even if it's 15 catches for 250 yards and a couple touchdowns, like, that would be a really, really good true freshman season for him. And I think from what we've seen, he's probably on track for that. And, we're 2 practices into the spring. So, you're drawing a long line, and the line's going to go all the way across the paper, and we have 2 dots on the line, and they're about this far apart. So, yeah, I don't know if you can extrapolate the whole line from where we are right now, but he certainly looks the part. And as far as Mylan Graham looks right now a lot like a guy who was immensely talented last year, came in over the summer, was kind of behind the 8 ball because he came in over the summer and did not have the freshman season that you would sort of expect from a 5-star wide receiver coming in. He did not have a catch last year. So that's like, oh boy, what's wrong with Mylan Graham? And the answer is nothing. Nothing is wrong with Mylan Graham. He came in over the summer, and then he, was sort of working his way towards the field a little more towards the end of the season, that's just kind of the general progress you're looking. Again, you're looking at kind of data points, and the data points are starting to form a little bit of a line, and the trend line is a very positive one there. And from what little we've seen this spring, again, it feels like, okay, he is certainly going to be in the mix for that 4th wide receiver role. And if not, if he's not the guy, he's certainly going to be getting probably some significant playing time this year, which, as a 2nd-year guy, like, great, that's exactly what you're looking for. And then, if Carnell Tate is off to the NFL after this next year, which is crazy to think because it feels like Carnell Tate just got to Ohio State, but if Carnell Tate's off to the NFL after next year, like, well, not Quincy Porter, Mylan Graham is certainly in line to be one of those guys next year, if not before.
And when we talk about freshman year, and you mentioned some of those numbers, like, understand that there have been like 14 Ohio State Buckeyes in their true freshman season to have 10 catches in a season. So, like, Jeremiah Smith was the 14th. There's only been 6 true freshman wide receivers that have had over 15 catches. And Carnell Tate was one of those. Ted Ginn, Garrett Wilson, David Boston, Chris Carter, and Jeremiah Smith. So when we talk about what they do as a freshman, man, that is a relative term in the Ohio State receiver room. And that relative is not Uncle Jeremiah. I'll tell you that. The next one I want to talk about, Tom, is the fact that Ohio State lost a bunch of leadership on the offensive line, but they've also returned a bunch as well. Case in point is you had Carson Hinsman last year was a summertime Iron Buckeye. Austin Searveld this spring is a winter time Iron Buckeye. And if you're not familiar with the Iron Buckeye, it's a weight room award for, like, the guys who work the hardest. They're not just the strongest, but they have the right attitudes. They take it with them every day. They do everything that they're asked and more. And so the springtime, the wintertime guys were named this week, and that was Sonny Styles, Austin Searveld, and Jeremiah Smith. And to have 2 guys on the offensive line who have been named Iron Buckeye, I think is pretty huge. And when you've also returning, Tegra Cibola, and you're bringing in some guys, but when you lose Seth McLaughlin and Donovan Jackson, like, that's a hit. But also they have now they've got these guys who have been in the program, have started relatively young, and now they're older, and they are not just veterans in terms of, like, I am now 20 years old or I'm now 21 years old. It's like, I have now started 18 games, or I have now started 7 games, and I'm not a new piece to the puzzle. And so I think that is pretty significant. And it's funny that Ohio State loses 4 starters on the offensive line. They've got to replace 4 starters on the offensive line. But it's also like they also returned like 4 starters on the offensive line because of everything they went through last year. So I think they're trending in a pretty good way. We'll see what happens at left tackle between Austin Searveld and Ethan Anianwa. But overall, I think you have to love the leadership and the experience that they've got there.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to say that they're trying to replace 4 starters. And this is also, to me, very clearly the best you feel and the most confident you would feel about the Ohio State offensive line at this time of year in at least the last 3 seasons and maybe more than that. I mean, you go back 2 years ago and it was just an absolute tire fire in there in the spring. And last year it was, you've got some pieces you feel good about. You got some question marks. You got, Seth McLaughlin was not, this time last year, Seth McLaughlin was the guy from Alabama who had some bad snaps and you didn't know what you were getting. And, then he turned into Remington Award winner Seth McLaughlin at Ohio State. But, again, we were at this point last year, we were looking at 2 data points and it was like, well, I mean, he's looked okay so far, but what does that mean? We'll see. They had a lot of question marks last year. And this year, it feels like you've got enough guys that you could throw out 5 guys who have started significant games in their career as an offensive line. You could just go Onianwa, Montgomery, Hinsman, Shabola, and Searveld as your right tackle. And those are 5 guys who have started significant games and played really major, significant snaps. Onianwa was a multi-year starter at Rice, but the other 4 guys all started in the college football playoff last year. So you could just throw, and that doesn't include Philip Daniels, who started at Minnesota, or Ian Moore, who's coming on strong, and some of the other guys that they've got in that room, some of the younger guys that are sort of coming on. So this is, as strange as it sounds, a year where I feel like I have fewer questions about the offensive line than I maybe do in the past. And, some of that is just, yeah, these guys are young, but a lot of these guys kind of got battlefield promotions, like in World War II, where, the officers got killed and it's like, congratulations, Lieutenant, you're a captain now. And like, that was kind of Carson Hinsman, who didn't play for a huge chunk of last season. Then it was like, okay, you got promoted to starting guard. And then Seth McLaughlin went down and all of a sudden, congratulations, you're the starting center now. And you're the starting center for the entire run through the college football playoff. And you did really well. So, now these are kind of like battle hardened guys who are coming in and it's like, well, was he a starter last year? Well, sort of, but for the most important parts of the season, yes. How did it go? Well, there's we mailed out lots of confetti to our members after the season. So I would guess it went pretty well. So this is a spot where you look at just the pure numbers and it's like, ooh, they lost a lot. And yet you feel like there's not in bad shape there.
They lost a lot, and you're still asking, where are they going to put all these guys? And if that's your question going into the spring on your offensive line, pat yourself on the back because you've done something good. Now, you still got to turn them into a workable offensive line. But when you've got these options and you're not like, we are going to have to hit the portal hard and we're going to have to hit it correct. Like, I don't think they need to do that this year. And I think they're pretty happy about it. CJ Hicks, Tom, another guy, he's moving positions, as everybody knows. And it's always interesting to watch guys who are moving positions, how they accept it. This is one that he wanted to make. And I made the reference that he's soaking into coaching like a 47-year-old at a Reds fantasy camp, shagging flies from Mount Oster, which I know you and I and all the Reds fans our age will appreciate the Ron Oster reference. But you watch him with Larry Johnson or any of Larry Johnson's assistants, like he's attached to them. He's taking it in, he's taking the coaching in, and he's finally getting what he wants, right? And so that's great. But now that he's getting what he wants to be really darn good at it, which is the exact kind of attitude that you need that guy to have. Because it can't just be like, good, I got what I want, now let me do what I want to do. And it's like, no. You're going to have to do it right. And he wants to do that. This is his last year at Ohio State. So you finally get what you want, you better be your best version of it. And it's interesting to watch him take that and do all of that and really, really be focused. Now, again, 2 practices in, you got to do it consistently, and you got to want that teaching consistently and then apply it. But it's just fun to watch him like some of these guys are so happy right now, and he's one of them as he's trying to take in everything that he can to be the best version of himself in his last opportunity as a Buckeye.
And you can tell he's already been putting in the work because you just look at him and he looks physically different than he did last year. I don't know if we've gotten an updated roster to know if he's up 10 pounds or 15 pounds or 20 pounds or whatever it was, but he has really bulked up quite a bit, and he doesn't look like a linebacker who's like tagged along on take your kid to work day at the defensive line. Like, he looks like a defensive end right now. He is bulked up quite a bit, but you can still see the quickness from him. You can see the explosiveness from him. Larry Johnson, I think, talked about the bend that he potentially can bring, that he could just get around the end because he's quick, and he can potentially be a really effective edge rusher for them. And this is something that he has pretty clearly wanted for a little bit of time. And so now you have this opportunity. And, as CJ Donaldson said on Wednesday, this is the last year I'm guaranteed to be able to play football. After this year, there's no guarantee that any of the seniors will, you don't just automatically get a ticket to the NFL just because you started at Ohio State. There are plenty of starters at Ohio State who don't end up going on to play in the NFL. So this is your last year. And so this is your last chance to really live up to the potential and live up to what you could be, and live up to what you have been hoping to get, to have a chance to do as a defensive end. And, saw him working with Larry Johnson on some of the drills where they were just like working on just like being explosive up. And he was like, there were guys who were, they basically lined up across from someone, and the guy across from them had a pad, and he was just the guy across from them was like standing straight up basically. So it wasn't like you were providing a lot of resistance and pushing back. But CJ Hicks, you just saw him get up and like explode right through the guy across from him. This is the stuff that you're sort of looking to see at this point. Does that mean that he's guaranteed to have 15 sacks this year? That doesn't, nothing even close to that kind of conversation right now. But all the stuff that you would want to see out of him at this point of the spring, you're seeing. The physical development, the adjustments, the, excitement, all of that kind of stuff. Like, it's all there. It's all sort of, it's all on track to be the senior year that I think that he hopes that he has, and that certainly the Ohio State program hopes that he has this year. And now there's 13 more practices this spring, and then, 20 whatever during this summer camp and fall camp and all that kind of stuff. But it's all there for CJ Hicks, which is really, at this point, that's all you can ask.
Yeah, and the body type of CJ Hicks, like, if they could get something out of him like Michigan got out of Josiah Stewart the past 2 years, who is a linebacker-sized speed rusher, then that's somebody that you can definitely make good use of and is a pain to defend or block. And you mentioned the bend. Like, just imagine the bend that Jack Sawyer had on that scoop and score around the right tackle. Like, he got low, and the tackles are kind of grasping for him, and that's something that CJ Hicks can add. It just has to continue to work on it. I want to stay on the defensive line, Tom, because a lot of this spring is just about leadership and building leaders and finding leaders. And Kenyatta Jackson is going to be one of the leaders on the defensive line. I think that's clear. He's a fourth-year guy, still just technically a redshirt junior, so he's got 2 years left. But a more vocal guy on the defensive line, and frankly, that's so young that they need some vocal leadership, and he's going to be that, and not just vocal, but by example. I do think it's interesting. I was watching Edric Houston a little bit, and you could see him emerging as a leader as well. And we talk about how sometimes you got to just read the tea leaves and look at where players are lined up. Like when we talked about the warm-up drill on like after the first practice, and who's in that front row, and Edric Houston has been in that front row in each of the first 2 practices, signifying those leaders. And when you've got your fourth-year guy stepping up and becoming a leader and being a leader, and Ty Hamilton pointed to him, and other guys are pointing to him at the combine when we're asking, like, who's going to replace you as in that leadership aspect. And people are talking about Kenyatta Jackson, but I also think it's interesting to watch Edric Houston become that, even though he is one of the younger three techs in that defensive line room, because you're talking about Tywone Malone's a fifth-year guy. Jason Moore is, a third-year sophomore. And then you got Edric Houston in there. But I think the fact that he came in last year and won the job as the backup to Tyleek Williams in about a week, then the guys behind him are kind of like, okay, you're the leader now. And it's like, I'm the captain now type of thing. And he's continued to take that into this spring and this year, and they need it.
Yeah, they definitely need it. They need him to be good this year, but they need him to be a leader in that room as well. And just the speed with which he went from true freshman defensive end to significant contributor 3-tech was that was one of the more remarkable kind of underreported stories on last year's team, because there was so much to talk about last year that kind of got lost a little bit. But him just kind of turning into like, oh, and now he's just kind of like a factor in the middle of this extremely veteran defensive line as a true freshman who did not come in as a 3-tech, that was pretty remarkable. And the fact that he jumped some of those guys on the depth chart, like that's meaningful to me, that it was not like, well, everyone else is hurt, so, we have to do this. It was, you've got a bunch of guys, but he's just more ready to play right now physically and mentally than guys who've been there multiple years. That's a pretty significant thing to me. He feels like his trajectory is basically straight up right now. Like he could be he's got 2 more years. Like even if he goes to the NFL at his first possible opportunity, he's got 2 more years. He was not a 3-tech this time last year. He was not a 3-tech in fall camp last year. He was someone who really, is just barely starting to scratch the surface there. And now you have such an opportunity in terms of the playing time you've got, in terms of all the development time you've got. And, the fact that there's not really a ton of depth behind you, they're going to be leaning on him quite a bit, assuming he stays healthy. I think this is a very big year for him. Then you get to okay, so then what? The who's behind you, I think, is the other really interesting part of this defensive line conversation, because all the stuff we talked about with the offensive line and like, oh boy, it's surprising how much quality depth they have there, even with having lost as many guys as they did. You haven't heard us say that about the defensive line, which, is somewhat telling.
Yeah. And, I was watching a couple of the true freshmen, Jarquez Carter and Trajan Odom. And when I say watching them, this is just like during warmups and stuff, because they're not going against anybody at this point, and there are no pads, and there's not going to be many pads throughout the course of the spring. But, Larry Johnson said that Trajan Odom is kind of maybe a more developmental guy. But when you look at him, he's a big dude, as you would expect. But like Carter is like listed at 6'1", and he looks it, and then he was standing right next to Trajan Odom, and it's like, oh wow, that's a big dude, Trajan Odom. Probably 6'4" and 280 some pounds, and those two guys could factor in. But you're talking about 2 true freshmen, so what can you really expect? And you need more out of Tywone Malone. You obviously need more out of Jason Moore. But also, who is Caden McDonald's backup at nose tackle? These are questions that are going to take a long time to answer, and maybe Tywone Malone factors in there as well because of his experience. And that is one of the many questions to address. And I think they'll go to the portal for some help there. If even if they like what they see this spring, I don't think they can afford to just like, yeah, we'll probably be fine. You can't rely on probably on the line of scrimmage. Tom, here's one for you. So one of my questions coming into spring is regarding the freshman linebackers. I know Eli Lee is an eventual middle linebacker. That was kind of a given. But my other question was who Riley Pettyjohn and TJ Alford, who's the middle linebacker and who's the will? Then on the first day it was Riley Pettyjohn at the mic and TJ Alford at the will. And then the second day it was again. And it was just interesting watching Riley Pettyjohn operate as the middle linebacker and be like at the head of the huddle and all 10 other guys like listening intently to what he's saying. And it's always just interesting to see like, that's a true freshman who should be in high school right now and is directing an Ohio State defense. And sure, it may be a bunch of like redshirt freshmen or sophomores or true freshmen, but he's still there and he's getting that work in and getting people where they need to be, pointing and doing all of these things. And it's just always interesting to watch a true freshman do that. And it's not always correct. And sometimes, he's going to need help. It's going to need to be corrected. But it's just fun to watch somebody who is brand new, but has, brand new. He's been here for 3 months and been getting ready to be this guy. And it's just fun to watch young guys look like they're operate as if they are veterans, even though they're probably swimming in the playbook and things are very condensed and small right now, just very small pages in terms of what we need you to do. It's just fun to watch.
Yeah, it is fun to watch. And you see at the beginning of every spring, the freshmen where, we are always told like drink through a fire hose and, you're getting thrown into these situations. Like if you're the one with the helmet radio on defense, you're getting thrown into the deep end of the pool. If this is your first or second practice, like, all right, let's see if you can swim. And to me, it's a little bit telling. Like you're going to have mistakes, and you're going to have mistakes with, true freshman quarterback Tavian St. Clair being the one with the helmet radio, and Riley Pettyjohn being the one with the helmet radio. And freshmen are going to make mistakes. Every single freshman makes mistakes in these practices. That's like, it's just, if you don't, that's a holy crap kind of thing, because you never ever see that. So you expect, oh, hey, this wide receiver's lined up wrong and has to get adjusted, or hey, the coach is yelling at this guy for doing something wrong or whatever. That's the norm. But just the fact that these are guys who are being trusted with that role, that's really telling to me. That's the coaches telling you what they think of the player very early on. And as you were talking, I think Riley Pettyjohn went pretty early in the black stripe draft. Tony, I am delighted to tell you that I got him number 3 overall. Our black stripe draft, the number 1 pick was Devin Sanchez, who's someone we've talked about on shows already about like, okay, you're seeing some stuff from him early. Quincy Porter, who we've already talked about, went number 2. Riley Pettyjohn went number 3. TJ Alford went number 4. So like these are all the names that we're sort of saying, and these are all the sort of the names that we had been hearing a little bit beforehand in terms of like, these are guys who might be able to make a little bit of an early impact. And, again, he's working with the threes. This is not someone who's right on the cusp of winning a starting job by any means. The first team linebackers are Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles. The second team linebackers are Peyton Pierce and Garrett Stover. And then we're looking at the threes. But these are guys who just, you're being put into a leadership position in terms, and this all goes to what some of the coaching staff has talked about. Be a leader in your class. You're not a leader on the team as a freshman, but you're, becoming a leader in your class. We talked about that on one of the last shows with Tavian St. Clair, being able to like show guys around the building because he knew where everything was, because he was, you're sort of taking on a leadership role because you're a little bit of ahead of everyone else. That's sort of what the Riley Pettyjohn thing looks like to me right now, too.
Another highly drafted freshman in that black stripe draft, if I recall, is Fahim Delane, safety. And it was interesting at one point watching some of these drills, Caleb Downs and Fahim Delane were in the defense together. And so you're talking like Fahim Delane is probably with the threes at that point. And so they threw Caleb Downs out there with him. And Caleb's just out there directing him everywhere to go and what to do, and just the ability to be led and to learn from Caleb Downs for Fahim Delane. Like, you're only going to get 1 year of this, I bet. So you better make the most of it. And so it was just interesting to see them throw those two together, because generally, like, there's a lot of safeties. There are plenty of safeties between Fahim Delane and Caleb Downs, and to put him with Downs, I thought was interesting, just so he can get, be able to work with him. Downs, like I said, he's pointing out where he should be, and then afterwards they can talk it out. And so to be on that level with that guy is a tremendous experience for a true freshman who, we'll see how much he plays this year. And I do think, again, one of the interesting things with the safeties, and we talked about this on one of the recent shows, is that they're playing both free safety and strong safety this spring. So that's also another really good learning experience for Fahim Delane, to learn both of those positions. And it's not going to go perfectly, as you said, Tom, but that's the for the defensive staff to feel like, okay, the freshman can handle it, so let's just do it. And Fahim Delane can handle it, so let's do it. And to get them out there learning it at a pace that they can handle this spring will obviously pay dividends down the road. But just interesting to watch those two out there, and Fahim Delane to be kind of like everybody else that we're talking about, soaking it all in and making the most of it.
Fahim Delane went 5th overall in the Black Stripe draft. So yes, again, these are a lot of the guys that we had sort of been told or sort of gleaned that you could expect some early potential, at least positive indicators from. And that is certainly a positive indicator when you're talking about a veteran guy like Caleb Downs out there, sort of like almost guiding him around in terms of like what to do. It reminds me so much of Andy Katzenmoyer's freshman year, and I am absolutely not saying Fahim Delane is going to put up Andy Katzenmoyer freshman level numbers or impact. That's not at all the point that I'm making here. But just, it was like Greg Belisari was almost like guiding him around by the arm and being like, okay, you go here now, and then you get the bad man with the football. And that was kind of how, because it was like you weren't quite ready in terms of like, you were ready physically to do it, but yet you didn't have the playbook entirely down. And, Caleb Downs, Greg Belisari is an orthopedic surgeon now, so he was plenty smart. And Caleb Downs is also plenty smart. Caleb Downs is probably going to have a football have a career in carving people up on the football field rather than in the operating room. But, either way, you've got a very, very intelligent, veteran player who can kind of be that teacher and like set you up for success. And, they don't need Fahim Delane to be a starter this year, but he's someone who, even going back to before the Tennessee game last year, Fahim Delane was at practices. Like a lot of these guys started showing up before the Rose Bowl. Fahim Delane was there at practices before the Tennessee game. So he's been around the program a little bit longer than some of these other guys. And we're at the point where being around the program for an extra week or two makes a big difference. Like this is still so early in these guys' careers that an extra week or two is a meaningful thing. So he's someone who I think he's not going to be a starter this year, and that's fine. They don't need him to be a starter this year. But if he is at a point where after this year, the game starts slowing down for him, and then you can potentially be this person who's sort of helping out the new guys next year, and in contention for a starting job at this time a year from now, that's a huge win for them.
I'm just going to push back for the surgeons in the audience. I don't think they appreciate, they don't carve people up. Okay, this is really, really precise stuff that they're doing. You're making them sound like butchers, and I won't have that on this show. No offense to the butchers. Again, I'm not trying to downplay the butchers. Okay, they are also precise. I'm just going to cut all of that out of the show. I don't want big butchers after me. I don't want big surgeon after me, or us, Tom, because you're in this as well. I want to talk about the quarterbacks, Tom, because we talked with all three of them. None of the three seems like this is too big for them, which I think is the first sign that you've got a shot. Because there are times where we talked with freshman quarterbacks or any quarterback, you're like, even just talking to somebody like, it's not going to happen this year for that guy. And I didn't get the sense from any of these guys, and they're throwing the ball well. Lincoln Kienholz looks like a different person at the table and on the field. So I think they've got what they need. My larger point here, Tom, is that for all the people out there, yes, this is an open quarterback competition. And I know what a lot of people are going to say is like, oh, yeah, just like it was when CJ Stroud or like it was with Justin Fields. You know how I know it's always an open competition? Because Ryan Day has never started the wrong guy. Like, he's never started the worst guy. That's how you know it's an open competition. The best guys win. And just because you may know who, or you may think you know who that best guy is right now, and you may be correct, that doesn't disprove, or that doesn't prove your point. Like this, the fact that, you're never going to go out there. Anybody that goes out there and starts the worst quarterback is probably the dad of that quarterback. All right. And he's probably, maybe a college coach, but that's generally not going to get the kind of wins that you need. So yes, 100% open competition. Julian Sayin may still go on and win it. Doesn't mean it wasn't an open competition, because no head coach in his right mind, even after a national championship, is going to start the guy that they know isn't as good? And we can go back to all of the controversy with Kyle McCord and Devin Brown. I think Ryan Day was proven correct in that one.
Yeah, I don't think there's anyone who could make a serious good faith argument that that was not the right choice there. And there's, was that sort of a down year by Ohio State quarterback standards ultimately? Yes. Is that because they started the wrong guy? No, like very clearly that was the right guy of the two choices. It's just the choices weren't quite as good that year. And, this year, we'll see how the choices play out. But yeah, I don't think people really understand how important all of these reps are and how much they grade every individual rep. And this is like the greatest currency that they have right now is reps with the ones. And so if they already knew this guy is definitely going to be the starter and there's not a serious question as to who the starter is going to be, they would not be wasting reps with the ones with someone else. And that in and of itself tells you, yes, it is a serious open competition. Yeah, they want to make sure all three guys are still on the roster this fall. Yes, absolutely. But the players know, like if we see this all the time, like you'll have, it's like, well, this is still an open sort of thing. If one guy is playing, if one guy's leading you down to 6 touchdowns in a row and the other guy's thrown 3 picks, like the players know, like, and obviously we're not even at the point of the spring where you would have that be the case yet, but the players, you're not going to fool the players. Like they're right there. They know you're not going to just like, well, actually, these guys are grading out exactly the same. Like the players aren't stupid. They're aware. Everyone who's there knows. So this is
they all have PFF subscriptions.
Despite that, they also know this is something where if this was not an open competition, it would not, they would not be wasting the time to give all these guys reps. And there's value in having these guys have reps with the one, because you are, even if you're the second guy, you are one play away from being the starter. So, this is a great way to evaluate guys and to make sure you are making the right choice. Because if you're just working with the twos, like, well, if one guy gets to work, we saw this last spring, who consistently looked like the best quarterback on the team. It was the guy who was throwing to Jeremiah Smith last spring. That was the guy who looked like consistently the best. So you've got to kind of give everyone that opportunity to see. Because like, boy, all the quarterbacks have hit really long passes downfield and looked really impressive. They've all gone to Jeremiah Smith. I wonder what the constant there is. Is there a consistent theme there? I don't know. It's probably the quarterbacks. There was always a quarterback involved. I guess that's the consistent theme. But you have to give these guys a reasonable chance. And what they're doing is, this is the same thing they've done last year. They'll run multiple fields of guys where you're kind of running two things at the same time. And you're getting guys reps, you're getting guys experience. And that's not just for the quarterbacks. That's the offensive line is getting reps. The defensive line is getting reps. The running backs are getting reps. Like this is something that they sort of introduced really, they've done it before, but it felt like they did it more in earnest last year as they were sort of evaluating everyone. And I think it's something that is, it is, if you have the depth to do it, it really works out to your benefit, because then you've got more guys with more reps who are potentially more ready if the need arises in the fall.
Last one for me, Tom, here, and let's talk about Jeremiah Smith. I'm not sure if we're going to make the show title about Jeremiah Smith, probably in some way. This is a guy, second year in a row, he's an Iron Buckeye. He was an Iron Buckeye in the summer portion last year, was named an Iron Buckeye, as we said earlier, one of the 3 Iron Buckeyes here in the winter portion. Now, could I be like, why wasn't he an Iron Buckeye last winter? Yes, I could absolutely do that. But seeing as he was the first ever Iron Buckeye as a true freshman, we can just stand off and criticizing him for not doing it his first couple of months on campus and instead doing it later on in the summer when he had been on campus for 5 or 6 months. But the thing is, to then, you're the first ever to do that. He's the first ever every time he does something. Basically, every time he does something for long enough, it's like, well, nobody's ever done that before. It's like, yes, I'm Jeremiah Smith. Except he's never like, yes, I'm Jeremiah Smith. He went out had the season that he did. Everybody knows him. And then he's back being one of 3 Iron Buckeyes this winter and hasn't missed a beat. Like, and can actually, maybe the beat is sped up and eventually now you're getting into speed metal and then you're going to lose people. But like, he's just continuing on. Like, I don't care about that. I don't care about the catches I had. National championship was fine. That was last year. That was me last year. If I'm the same guy last year same guy this year as I was last year, then I'm not doing what I need to be doing. I'm not progressing. And everything about this guy is, I'm going to continue to get better. I'm going to continue to work as hard as everybody and harder than anybody. And the results are going to continue to show. And the thing is, like, it's always when coaches say, like, when your best players are your hardest workers, that's when you're great. And also, like, when your most talented player is also the hardest worker, then you've got something special as well. And that's absolutely what this guy is. And I'm sure he's had to go and do some things in terms of like, well, I've got to do a signing here, or I've got to jump on a plane here and go do this for NIL or whatever. Like, he's got some irons in the fire, but not so much that he's not one of the 3 hardest working dudes in the weight room over the winter. Like, his priorities are pretty incredible. And, everything he does is impressive, and we should no longer maybe be surprised by it. But hey, kudos to this guy, because he doesn't take it easy, and he absolutely could. He just won't.
Yeah, and you don't get to be where he is just by, I'm naturally talented. Like, you can be naturally gifted and just coast, and you could be fine, and you could have a perfectly successful career that way. You don't get to do the stuff that Jeremiah Smith did if you're just kind of like coasting on natural ability. No one has that much natural ability. Like, you have to work and you have to get better. And, they talk about getting 1% better every day. If he's getting 1% better every day, like, think about how good the denominator it is. Like, you're already pretty darn good. So if you're getting 1% better, that's a pretty significant step. And it's interesting how frequently the guys who are the, incredibly gifted ones are also the ones who are working incredibly hard. And it's Caleb Downs is this incredibly gifted player, but who's in the film room more than anyone else? Caleb Downs, who was working with the Monarch machine every day before practice, every day after practice. It was Marvin Harrison, and he's got the NFL Hall of Famer genes. So why didn't he just coast? Well, he just went out and put in the work, because that's what it takes to get to be that level. That's kind of the dirty little secret. And if you can be the guy who has a great season and then looks and goes, where do I need to get better? That's where you become like an all-timer. Like, I think I'm going to say the name Mike Trout right now, and everyone's going to go, the guy who's hurt all the time? Yes. But before he was the guy who was hurt all the time, he was the guy who won the MVP and then looked and said, like, I wasn't very good against high fastballs this last season. So I'm going to spend the entire offseason working on hitting high fastballs. And then when people started to throw him high fastballs, he hit them out of the ballpark the next year. And it was like, oh, well, you can't do that anymore. And then he's like, I'm going to try and steal 40 bases this year. And then he just stole 40 bases. And he like kept up all the other stuff. And that's why through age, I don't remember what it was like through age 26 or something, he was like the single greatest player of all time. And then injuries kind of caught up with him, and Artie Moreno, being a terrible baseball team owner, kind of caught up with him. And so, it didn't end up, he's still going to make the Hall of Fame. And, there's stuff that's out of your control that can go against you. But, the stuff that was in his control, he controlled all of it. And that's kind of what I see with Jeremiah Smith, where if you're the first guy as a true freshman to earn the Iron Buckeye, like, that's not something they give out. They awarded 3 players this year out of spring. 3 out of the 105 players on the roster, or whatever the number is right now. That is not something that it's like, oh, you get a trophy and you get a trophy. Mm-hmm. That is, okay, you're the one who's working the hardest and you're the one who's doing the most. And it's not just natural talent. It's all the time, all the effort, all the everything. If you have the talent, sometimes you have the guys who are not naturally talented, who are just the absolute scrappers, who scrap and fight and work, and they fight their way up to being, a contributor. And like, those are always kind of the fan favorite kind of guys. And those are great. And sometimes you have the guys who are incredibly talented, but don't necessarily put in the work. And then they can have good careers too. But if you have both of those together, that's where you get the like generational outlier. And that feels like that's what we're looking.
Yep. And if all goes well, Buckeye fans, you got him for 2 more years. So congrats on that. So that'll wrap up this recap of what we've learned in the first week of spring ball. We'll be back on campus next week talking with players and coaches. So we've already been doing that all week. So you can find a ton of that at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle for all of the player interviews. And then at BuckeyeHuddle.com for what we're talking about, what we're seeing, and hearing from everyone there. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you all later.